Hey guys, tonight we slip into the thick wool tunic of a Viking who never set sail, not because he couldn't, but because someone had to stay behind and make sure the chickens didn't burn down the house. You're not swinging an axe on foreign shores or shouting across stormy waves. Nope, you're still in bed, curled up in a wooden longhouse that smells like smoke, hay, and yesterday's onion stew. The air's chillier than you'd like, even under the coarse wool blankets, and the fire in the hearth is mostly ember now. You crack one eye open. Light filters through the smoke hole in soft, dancing strips sunlight, diffused by that constant wood smoke fog curling just beneath the roof beams. You stretch, joints clicking like old shield buckles, and you sit up. The dried herbs hanging above you rustle faintly. Outside, someone's already hacking away at firewood, and a goat is bleating like it lost a philosophical argument. This isn't a world of alarm clocks and smartphones. It's one of rhythms, chores, the sound of boots on packed earth, and the unmistakable stench of a neighbor's wool socks drying by the fire again. You're not thrilled, but you are awake. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time. It is always fun seeing sleepy history lovers from all over the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've grown as your feet hit the cold floorboards. There's straw jammed between the planks, meant to insulate, but it mostly insulates your toes from happiness. You slip on your thick woolen socks, one with a hole the size of a small coin, and grab your cloak from the peg near the door. The air inside the longhouse is heavy and moist. Outside, it's frostbitten and crisp. Like biting into a snow-covered apple, the others in the household are already up. Your uncle is muttering about needing to fix the fence again, and your aunt is stirring something in a pot that smells vaguely edible. A child shrieks as a dog steals a piece of bread from their hand. You pass by them, nodding sleepily, not even pausing to intervene. The rhythm of a Viking homebody isn't built on heroic deeds. It's built on consistency and low expectations. Outdoors, the village is yawning awake. Smoke pours from rooftops in lazy spirals. Birds circle above in spirals of their own. And a trio of chickens wander past your legs like they own the place. You squint toward the distant fjord, water gleaming dully beneath the rising sun. Your cousin is already out there on the shore, pulling in fishing nets. You wave. He doesn't wave back. Classic, you start your morning the usual way, poking the fire, checking that no sheep wandered off in the night, and cursing the frost clinging to the door hinges. You duck into the small shed where dried peat is kept, grab a block, and return to feed the hearth. As you do, the glow returns, casting golden light against the wooden walls carved with little runes and half-finished symbols your brothers swore were magical. They aren't. Historians still argue whether the average Viking even thought about raiding most of the time. Evidence suggests the majority stayed close to home, farming, tending to livestock, and griping about wet boots. The image of wild warriors pillaging every Sunday doesn't quite reflect the average day-to-day life. Sure, there were raids, but there were also cows. And those cows weren't going to feed themselves. A crow lands on the roof with a loud thunk, startling the cat curled by the fire. You sigh, another sign from Odin, or just an annoying bird with poor landing skills. You settle in near the hearth with your hands outstretched. Warmth seeps back into your fingers. On the wall hangs a small woven tapestry your mother made. Oddly enough, a bear eating a fish while wearing a crown. No one has explained it, and at this point, you're too afraid to ask. The bear stares at you as if to say, "Get on with it." And so, you do. You fetch water, stack wood, brush hay off the sleeping bench, and finally prepare for what passes as breakfast. It's not glamorous. Gruel, likely boiled until it gives up hope, then laced with a few pinches of salt and maybe a wild berry or two if the jar isn't empty. You ladle some into a bowl and take a seat on a low stool. Your knees protest, the gruel is hot, bland, and perfect. As you eat, a goat ambles into the room. You stare at it. It stares at you. Then, it bleats loudly and turns around, knocking over a stack of firewood in the process. Somewhere in the back, your uncle yells something in Old Norse that sounds both creative and mildly threatening. You're used to this. Goats are agents of chaos. You learned that long ago, probably the same week you learned not to turn your back on one holding eye contact. They've got that low-key energy. As the morning settles in, the village outside grows noisier. The smith begins hammering away at a blade someone claims is ceremonial, though you're pretty sure it's just a fancy butter knife. Children run shrieking past the longhouse, one of them wielding a stick like a sword, another crying because they stepped in something squishy. Probably not mud. You sip the last of your gruel, lick the spoon, and listen. There's a calm here, even amid the clatter. A certain gentle rhythm that carries you along, like a boat drifting on still water. No raiding party today. No long voyage. Just a home, some goats, and the occasional reminder that peace can be exhausting too. Tomorrow, you'll probably do it all again. Your bowl is empty. The goat is still smugly loitering by the hearth, and your toes have finally warmed up enough. To function, it's time to face the chores. Not the glamorous kind, like forging swords or yelling for Valhalla into a storm. No, your version of heroism involves hauling things, patching roofs, and getting hay out of your sleeves for the third time before noon. You step outside again, blinking at the pale sunlight. It's not exactly warm, but it's not cold enough. Too hurt, just that crisp, nose-tingling chill that makes you move a little faster. You grab your tools from the lean-to beside the longhouse. A small axe, a dull knife, and a coil of rope that smells like fish and regret. Most of these chores don't require finesse. They just require endurance. Like a saga told by your grandfather that lasts 3 hours and includes 6 different Bjorns. First up, chopping firewood. Again, always, again. You already chopped firewood yesterday, and the day before that, and last week when it rained sideways. But the stack is never high enough. Firewood disappears faster than gossip at the communal well. You plant your boots into the muddy earth, swing the axe, and feel the jolt in your arms as the log splits clean. It's mildly satisfying, until the next one refuses to cooperate and sends a splinter into your thumb. Still, the work warms you. Faster than the fire did earlier. You fall into rhythm, lift, swing, crack, stack. The sound echoes between long houses, interrupted only by the occasional cursing of someone who dropped a bucket. The village breathes like a slow machine, everyone locked into their routine. Some historians argue that early Norse society was surprisingly egalitarian when it came to daily labor. Especially in rural settlements like this one, everyone worked. Even the guy who claimed to be descended from Odin had to feed the pigs. Once the firewood stack is slightly less shameful, you move on to the roof. There's a leak, again, a familiar one. Every spring, the thatch shifts, the moss dries out, and suddenly you've got drip 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 soaking your sleeping mat. You clamber up using the rickety ladder, which creaks like it's issuing a legal disclaimer. From the rooftop, you get a decent view, the other longhouses with their pointed gables, the smoky horizon, and 3 cows attempting to break into someone's food shed. They're surprisingly coordinated. You get to work the section above your bed, tugging old reeds free and pressing new bundles into place. The trick is overlapping the reeds enough that rain runs down them instead of straight through. It's tedious, itchy work. Bits of straw stick to your face, and one bug crawls directly into your sleeve. But you carry on, mostly because if you don't, you'll be sleeping in a puddle. There's a strange piece to these tasks, predictable, repetitive, almost meditative. Not thrilling, no, but grounding. You start to hum an old tune, one your mother used to sing while darning socks. It's slightly off-key and doesn't rhyme, but the rhythm helps. A few houses over, your cousin has managed to get his head stuck in a hay cart. Again, you ignore it. He'll work it out. He always does. Besides, you have more honorable things to do, like fixing the fence the goats knocked down last week. Probably the same goats who keep using your door as a scratching post. You grab the hammer and a few crude nails. The fence isn't exactly a feat of engineering, it's just a line of half-rotted planks held together by willpower and curses. Still, it keeps the livestock where they belong. Mostly you spend the next half hour banging nails with more enthusiasm than skill. The fence wobbles, creaks, and eventually holds at least enough to pretend you fixed it properly. You lean against it with a sigh. One solid gust might undo all your work, but for now, it's acceptable. Midway through tying the last bit of rope, you're interrupted by the low bellow of someone's ox. It's wandering down the road, dragging half of its yoke behind it. Step aside, let it pass, and watch as it disappears toward the fjord. Nobody bothers chasing it. You figure it'll come back when it's hungry. That's what you'd do. Historians still debate how centralized or organized Viking settlements really were. Sure, there were laws, some quite sophisticated, but daily life often ran on informal routines and neighborly negotiations. If someone's ox wandered into your shed, you just dealt with it. Yelled a bit. Shared the cheese later. Back inside the house, you take a moment to rest. Your hands are rough with splinters. Your cloak is covered in straw, and you've got a welt forming on your shin from tripping over a water bucket earlier. You pull off your boots and flop down on a bench that smells faintly of fish oil and family arguments. From the far side of the longhouse, your uncle is sharpening a blade that looks too ceremonial to be useful. He tells you, without looking up, that the edge remembers battles. You don't argue, mostly because you're too tired, and also because last time you did, he launched into a 3-hour monologue about a duel involving cheese theft. The chores for the morning are mostly done. The house is warmer, the roof is less leaky, and the fence miraculously still stands. You sit by the fire, Nibble on a piece of dried apple, and let your shoulders relax. The rhythm of home life is its own kind of saga. No dragons, no ships. On the horizon just stubborn fences, misbehaving goats, and the satisfaction of a log splitting clean. You glance toward the door. More light now. Afternoon approaches. Soon there'll be weaving to help with, and maybe a trip to the well, if someone hasn't already dropped the bucket in again. But for now, you sit and breathe. And maybe, just maybe, you don't completely hate staying home today. You eventually peel yourself away from the bench and wander into the side room, where the loom stands upright and commanding like some ancient wooden beast. The sunlight filters through the slatted wall, casting striped shadows across the floor. Dust motes drift lazily in the air, and your aunt is already seated, her hands moving with the quiet certainty of someone who's done this every day since the last eclipse. You sit beside her, adjusting the heavy wooden shuttle. The loom hums with the soft clatter of wool being drawn, pushed, pressed. There's something strangely hypnotic about it, almost like the gentle sound of waves against a boat, but warmer, softer. Weaving is patient work. You don't rush. You move with the loom's rhythm, the wooden parts creaking in agreement with your every motion. Your aunt hums a tune older than any saga, and you realize you know the melody too. It's one of those songs that drifts from generation to generation, passed along like family secrets and half-finished knitting projects. She starts telling a story, mid-thread something, about a ghost who haunts the northern shore and only appears to people who forget to feed their cats. You're not sure whether it's a joke or an actual warning, but either way, you nod solemnly and keep weaving. Historians still argue whether textile work in Viking households was considered sacred, symbolic, or just extremely practical. What's clear is that woven goods were vital not just for clothing but for trade, for status, for warmth. And most of the time, it was done by hand, with care and an endless supply of wool that never seemed to run out, or run low, or run anywhere. Wool doesn't run, but you know what I mean. You glance over at your aunt's work. Her pattern is intricate geometric shapes that might represent trees or mountains or possibly angry chickens. Your own weaving is simpler, less symmetrical, but it holds together. Mostly, occasionally, someone pokes their head in, mumbles something about firewood or goats, and retreats again. No one lingers long. The loom room is like a shrine, quiet, rhythmic, contemplative. Time slows down here, which is probably why you nearly fall asleep while working the warp threads. Your aunt nudges you gently when your head begins to droop. The gods won't finish your tunic for you, she mutters. Weaving is one of those tasks you can lose yourself in half-conscious, your mind drifting while your hands continue to work. You start to think about other things, the clouds rolling in, the sound of the fjord lapping against the rocks. The story your neighbor told last week about a reindeer that wandered into their pantry and refused to leave. It happens. Your stomach eventually reminds you that it's been hours since the gruel, so you step away and stretch your arms until they pop like dried twigs. Outside, the sun is inching toward its downward arc. You decide it's time for one of your favorite duties of the day, walking to the communal well, not because hauling water is fun, it isn't, but because it's where all the gossip lives. You sling an empty bucket over your shoulder and head out. your boots squelching through a particularly wet patch of path. The well sits at the village's center, surrounded by stones that have seen more footsteps than your cloak has seen winters. A few people are already there, an older woman who always smells like garlic, a younger man with exactly 3 teeth, and a child who seems to be wearing half a chicken feather coat. Possibly intentionally. You greet them with a nod, and the talk begins immediately. Someone claims the fjord is talking a gonad, echoes bouncing off the rocks. Another insists their neighbor's cow has been possessed by a spirit because it refused to moo during the thunderstorm. You just listen, nodding wisely, occasionally tossing in a "hmm," or you don't say to keep the rhythm going. In Viking Age rural life, wells were more than just a water source. They were information hubs, social salons, and complaint centers. Everyone came here, every day, and everything worth knowing passed through this circle of stones at least once. Fringe tidbit: in some Norse villages, certain wells were believed to house spirits or minor gods, and offerings like coins or herbs were sometimes tossed in. You never do that, mostly because you need your coins, and herbs are better in stew. After a good 20 minutes of gossip, and 2 attempts by the child to steal your belt, you fill your bucket and start the short walk back. The bucket is heavier now, of course, and splashes against your leg, soaking through your wool tunic in the most inconvenient spot. You sigh and shift your grip, imagining, just for a second, what life might be like if you were out at sea, exploring new lands, discovering unknown treasures. Then your foot catches a rock and you nearly spill the whole bucket. The water sloshes but stays inside, barely. You pause, mutter a thank you to whatever minor spirit kept it from tipping, and trudge onward. When you reach the longhouse again, the sun has sunk lower, and the wind is starting to bite. You duck back inside, where the fire crackles warmly, and your aunt has moved on to spinning wool now, her spindle dancing between her fingers. You set the bucket down with a victorious grunt, as if you've slain a beast. Only spilled it twice this time, you announce. No one claps, but the cat yawns in approval. The rest of the household drifts back in. Sends neighbors. That one guy who doesn't actually live here but always seems to show up when stew is ready. You wipe your hands, stretch your back, and accept a piece of dried fish someone hands you without question. Outside, the day is winding down, but you're far from done. There's something deeply satisfying about a midday nap, especially when it comes not as a luxury but as a strategic survival move. The house is warm, the chores are half done, and the sun is still hanging lazily above the rooftops. You sneak back toward your cot, the one tucked beneath the woven wall hanging of what's supposed to be a raven but suspiciously resembles a lopsided chicken, and you collapse with the grace of a sack of wet flour. The fire's warmth clings to the wooden beams, wrapping you like an extra cloak. You pull a fur over your shoulders, close your eyes, and let your bones melt into the straw-stuffed mattress. Outside, you hear someone shout about a missing turnip. Someone else shouts back that it wasn't a turnip, it was a very angry beet. You tune it out. Midday rest was common in many early societies, including Norse households, especially in cold climates where the body needed every opportunity to retain heat and restore strength. Historians still argue whether this nap period was a sacred pause or just a practical break wedged between too many chores. But you know this. Missing it makes the rest of the day 10 times worse. Sleep doesn't come quickly though, not today. Your toes are still thawing from the well walk, and there's a chicken softly cooing just outside the wall, as if mocking your need for rest. You roll onto your side and stare at a crack in the wall planks, imagining what it would be like to be somewhere warm. Maybe a monastery with heated floors. Maybe even a fancy bathhouse with soap. Imagine you almost drift off, lulled by the rhythmic snoring of your uncle in the next cot. When the door creaks open and someone steps inside with just enough noise to ruin everything, it's your cousin. Of course you open one eye to see him holding something behind his back and grinning like a man who definitely broke something. I fixed the door latch. He says, you wait. It might not open anymore, but it doesn't fall off now. You sigh. This is the same cousin who once tried to invent a self-fanning helmet using feathers and a goat harness. It did not end well. You roll back over and attempt to resume your nap, just as you're on the edge of that delicious fuzzy drift. Something thuds against the wall, followed by flapping, then a clatter of clay. The chicken has apparently declared war. You bolt upright. Through the narrow window slot, you can see feathers drifting like snowflakes and hear someone outside yelling. It's in the grain bin again. You trudge outside, blankets still over your shoulders like some weary Viking chieftain of bedtime. And there it is, your family's most notorious hen, stomping about in a pile of grain like it owns the village. Your little cousin is chasing it with a broom. Your other cousin is laughing so hard he's crying. And the chicken is clearly winning. You corner it gently, using your cloak like a net. And after 2 comedic laps around a firewood stack, you finally catch it. It squawks like a creature possessed, but eventually settles into your arms, smug and dusty. You march it back to the coop, muttering threats and promises of stew it definitely doesn't believe. Quirky tidbit. Some Vikings actually believed certain animals could be reincarnated souls or messengers of the gods. So, technically, you just wrestled a spiritual emissary out of the barley bin. Congratulations by now. Nap time is a lost cause. You settle for the next best thing, plopping down on a bench with your feet up, letting the sun hit your face. You close your eyes, not quite asleep, but definitely somewhere close. It's quiet for once. You hear a distant hammer, the wind brushing the trees, and someone softly singing from the house next door an old lullaby about a bear who forgot how to sleep. Probably symbolic, probably deeply confusing. You start thinking again, not the deep, meaningful kind of thoughts, just the floating kind. Like, why does that one roof always lean to the left? How many fish would it take to build a chair? Could you convince the town council to outlaw chickens? You never get your answers. Your uncle calls your name from the other side of the yard, and you jolt like someone dropped ice down your back. Come on, he says. Time to clean the fish. Of course it is. You shuffle to the wooden bench near the smokehouse, where the fish wait in a shallow basket gleaming silver. Eyes like tiny glass beads staring back at you with frozen judgment. You take a knife, sit down, and begin the slippery task of gutting, scraping, rinsing. The smell is invigorating. You'll never get it out of your sleeves, or your soul. As you work, your uncle tells stories, mostly made-up ones, at least. You hope so. Today's tale is about a selkie who turned into a woman, married a fisherman, then turned back into a seal because he forgot to say good morning 3 days in a row. The moral: never take your partner for granted. Or maybe, always respect magical sea creatures. Or just say good morning more often. The fish pile slowly disappears. Your hands grow numb, wet with seawater and fish scales, but the Story network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com.retry. As the afternoon wanes and the light softens, you feel it, that subtle shift in the air, the way everything seems to pause for a heartbeat before continuing again. The sky turns from bright blue to a smoky mix of lavender and gray, and it's time to wrap up what's left of your tasks before the long shadow of twilight settles over the village. You gather a small basket of nails, a hammer, and the sled runner that's been giving you grief for weeks. It's bent, splintered, and altogether untrustworthy, much like the man who swore it was just as good as new when he gave it to you. You squat beside it, the cold earth soaking into your knees through the wool of your trousers, and you take a moment to wonder why it always feels like everything breaks in the same week. The repair is simple in theory. Pull out the broken peg, realign the board, reinforce with a couple of iron nails, and pretend you know what you're doing. The wood is stiff from the cold, the nails slightly bent, and the hammer has a mind of its own. Each swing feels like a gamble. One good strike, then a glance off the edge. Then another strike that makes you question your arm strength. Historians still argue whether the tools used in Norse households were standardized across regions or cobbled together from whatever iron scraps were lying around. Judging by your hammer, which looks like it was forged in a rush by a distracted blacksmith, you're leaning toward the latter. You keep working anyway, not because it's fun, but because sleds are essential. They carry firewood, food, even the village loudmouth when his ankle gave out during last year's turnip festival. You hammer one more nail in with a little extra flair, and it holds. For now, nearby, your cousin is struggling with a pile of rope. He's trying to tie something that looks like a bundle of firewood but might also be a very sleepy dog. You offer help. He declines. It collapses. You say nothing. You're both used to this dance. You wipe your hands on your tunic, smearing them with a lovely blend of sap and iron dust, and stretch your back until it pops like a frost-cracked branch. The sun is nearly gone now, slipping behind the low hills beyond the fjord. That dusky blue settles over everything, the kind that makes wooden beams glow softly and turns every shadow into something older than it is. You gather your tools, brush off the dirt, and return to the longhouse. The hearth fire has been rekindled. It crackles with renewed life, casting flickering light over the fur-lined benches and the tangle of feet and cloaks that now occupy the common room. It's nearly time for the evening meal. The scent hits you first. Smoky lamb, maybe salted cod, definitely turnips. Always turnips. Turnips are the backbone of Viking cuisine and also the reason your dreams smell like earth. Someone ladles stew into carved wooden bowls, and you're handed one without ceremony. You sit cross-legged beside the fire, bowl in hand, trying not to drop chunks of potato into your lap. The conversation swells around you, not sharp or fast, but slow rolling, comfortable. Someone starts retelling a saga. Not one of the epic, blood-soaked ones, but the cozy kind. about a man who tried to impress a woman by catching a giant trout and ended up pulling his pants off in the river. Classic. Vikings loved stories. It's not all axes and conquests. There's evidence that longhouse gatherings were rich with oral tradition, from legendary sagas to local gossip woven into parables. This one's told with dramatic flair, your neighbor standing up and the trouts escape with wild flailing, everyone laughs, even the stoic old woman who hasn't smiled since that sheep incident 3 winters ago. You join in the laughter. Stew halfway to your mouth, spoon wobbling dangerously. The warmth from the fire and the food creeps into your limbs like a kind friend settling beside you. It's not excitement, not a feast, not a tale of glory, but it's good. It's real. As the meal winds down, someone breaks out a flute-hollowed reed with a few off-center holes. The tune they play is meandering and vaguely melancholic, like someone trying to remember a melody from childhood. You don't recognize it, but your foot taps along anyway. You look around the room. Cloaks hang from beams, drying in the heat. A toddler is snoring face down in a bowl. A man is carefully sipping broth like it contains prophecy. And across from you, your aunt is quietly sewing a patch onto a mitten with the same thread she used for the banner last Yule. You glance out. The narrow window again. The stars are beginning to blink into view, scattered and sharp against the darkening velvet sky. You sigh, stretch your legs, and realize that somehow, despite the repairs, the nails, the goose chase with the chicken, and the taste of half-scorched turnip, the day has slipped by with barely a ripple. That's the thing about staying home. It's not glamorous, and it's not carved into stone tablets or sung by poets. But there's something lasting about it, something quiet and necessary. The repairs made, the wood stacked, the stew shared. The world doesn't change, but it turns all the same. And you get to be part of its turning. You stand up, brush crumbs from your cloak, and place your bowl near the fire to dry. The roommate network error occurred. Please check your connection. And try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com.retry. The night has officially begun its slow descent. But before the village truly surrenders to sleep, there's one last destination on your evening agenda: the town council meeting. Yes, that meeting. The one where half the village gathers to discuss matters of profound importance, such as who moved the manure pile too close to the goat pen, or whether Eric's fence is technically one plank too far west. You wrap yourself in your thickest cloak. It still smells faintly of smoked fish and trudge across the hardening ground toward the meeting hall. It's not really a hall in the majestic sense. More like a slightly larger longhouse, with extra benches and fewer goats. As you push the door open, the heat and human noise hit you all at once. Inside, it's already crowded. People are seated along both walls, some on benches, others on logs dragged in for the occasion. There's a central fire burning low, casting shadows across the ceiling and lending everyone a mysterious air they do not deserve. A few torches flicker near the walls, one dripping wax dangerously close to someone's boot. You squeeze into a space between two neighbors, one chewing on something suspiciously crunchy, the other already asleep. Hand, prepare for what will be, without question, the slowest part of your day. The meeting begins with a bang. Literally, the village elder, who also happens to be the miller, an unofficial goose mediator, slaps a carved staff against the ground, and clears his throat in that grand, expectant way that suggests something momentous is about to happen. First order of business. He says, the south gate creaks too loud at night, and you're off. What follows is a parade of grievances, each delivered with the solemnity of a religious rite. A man stands and passionately argues that his sheep are too anxious because someone's been singing off-key by the fjord. A woman accuses her neighbor of borrowing her butter churn and returning it differently shaped. No one really knows what that means. You sit through it all, hands folded, trying not to yawn too obviously. Every once in a while, your thoughts drift. You imagine you're aboard a longship, wind in your hair, stars overhead, then you're snapped back by a heated debate about whether fish drying on communal racks should be rotated clockwise or counterclockwise. You wish you were kidding. Historians still argue whether Viking councils were democratic in a meaningful sense or more symbolic, half ceremony, half chance to air out old grievances in a structured setting. From your experience, it's probably both. There is a vote at some point, involving rocks and a carved stick. But you're pretty sure nobody actually counts the rocks. Still, there's value in the gathering, not in the decisions themselves. Most people ignore those anyway, but in the simple act of coming together, listening, and occasionally throwing in a sarcastic comment, just loud enough to get a laugh. Case in point, when the blacksmith complains that people keep borrowing his tongs without asking, someone behind you mutters, "Maybe the tongs are trying to escape." It ripples through the crowd like a warm breeze. Even the elder chuckles, then glares around as if he hadn't. Eventually, someone brings out flatbread and dried apple slices, the universal signal that the meeting has peaked. You nibble politely, nod along as someone proposes a new dunk regulation, and silently wonder whether this same conversation happened last month. It did, and it'll happen again. Quirky tidbit. In some Norse communities, council meetings were held outdoors unless the weather was truly awful. The logic? Discomfort shortens arguments. But here, everyone's cozy enough to complain for hours. And they do. As the meeting winds down, people start filtering out in clusters, some still muttering, others laughing, a few trying to remember if they left stew on the fire. You step out into the cool night air, deeply relieved. Your cloak flaps gently in the breeze, and you stretch your arms toward the stars as if to thank them for your survival. The walk back to your longhouse is quiet. Most of the village has gone still, the fires banked low, the animals tucked in or, more likely, wandering into trouble. You pass the well, now just a round shadow in the dark. The stars reflect faintly on its surface. There's something grounding about it, how the same stars looked down on this place long before you were born, and they'll look down long after your sled breaks again. You pause for a moment and look up. The sky is bright with stars. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a frozen river. You pick out familiar constellations, the warrior, the serpent, the awkward goat. Okay, that last one is your own invention, but you see it every time. There's no rush to return home, but the cold is creeping through your boots. You start moving again, past quiet fences, quiet animals, quiet doors. The village is wrapped in sleep, nor, close to it, only a few windows glow with soft firelight. Back inside, the longhouse is peaceful. The fire's low, casting just enough light to see by. Most of your family is already asleep, bundled in furs and cloaks, breathing slowly. You step carefully, trying not to wake anyone as you find your spot near the wall and settle in again. As you lie down, the day replays in your mind, not as a list of tasks or events, but as a quiet rhythm. Chores, conversations, repairs, food, laughter, complaints, and stars. No drama, no battles, no fame, just life. Just enough. You pull your blanket up to your chin, feeling the warmth gather around your tired limbs. Someone mumbles in their sleep. A log pops in the hearth. The night holds its breath. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. And strangely, you don't mind. Morning arrives without fanfare, slipping into the longhouse on the back of a breeze that smells faintly of wet moss and something baking. You're not jolted awake, no roosters screaming, no battle horns, no dream of falling off a fjord cliff. Instead, you surface from sleep slowly, as if drifting upward through layers of wool, smoke, and sleep-heavy limbs. The coals in the hearth have been rekindled, and someone's already boiling water. You hear the soft rustling of clothes being pulled over heads, the creak of a wooden spoon in a clay pot, and the unmistakable sound of someone sneezing like they've been cursed by a forest spirit. Probably your uncle. Always your uncle. You stretch beneath your blanket. Your body complains with a full chorus, sneeze, back, and shoulders all having something to say. It's not pain, exactly, just the knowledge that you exist in a very solid, very mortal body. You sit up, blink through the early light, and reach for your socks. One is damp. You don't ask why. Breakfast is humble again, leftover flatbread, thick porridge, maybe a piece of dried apple if you're lucky. You settle on your usual bench and accept a bowl from your cousin, who looks suspiciously smug about something. You'll find out what later. Or maybe you won't. Best not to ask before you've had food. Outside, the world is gray and damp. A soft drizzle paints the packed dirt with a sheen, and everything smells like wet wool. You step out, hood up, boots heavy, and brace yourself for another round of duties. But today isn't just about firewood and fences. It's washing day. The very words chill your spine. Not because washing is hard, but because washing means cold water, numb hands, and clothes that somehow return stiffer than when they left it. Also means you have to confront the mysterious stains that have taken up permanent residence on your tunic. You haul a bundle of linens, socks, and what may or may not be your aunt's ceremonial shawl to the edge of the stream. The washing stones sit like ancient tortoises along the bank, slick with moss and memories. You kneel beside one, dip your hands in, and immediately regret your life choices. The water is a liquid reminder that the fjord is always watching and rarely forgiving. You scrub, you rinse. You slap fabric against the stones with dramatic flair. At some point, your cousin joins you, drops their bundle, and proceeds to do everything wrong. You say nothing. There are some battles you just let the gods judge. Historians still argue whether Norse hygiene was primitive or surprisingly advanced. Some records describe combs, tweezers, and even ear picks as common possessions. Others describe Viking warriors as earth-scented. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. You don't smell terrible, but you also wouldn't stand near a candle, a fringe tidbit. Some sagas mention ceremonial cleansing before big events, not just weddings or feasts, but legal trials and duels. Clean tunics and clear consciences, apparently. Once the washing is done, at least. As done as it's going to get, to wring out the garments, hang them over nearby branches, and hope the drizzle gives up before the wind gets any clever ideas. The socks, as always, will dry in the shape of despair. You return to the house, half-frozen hair, wet and plastered to your forehead, only to find that your little cousin has borrowed your second-best belt and is now using it to tie together a row of onions. For reasons, you rescue it. The onions survive. Barely. You spend the next hour mending a basket that's more hole than structure. You patch the floor mat with bits of braided straw. You rewrap the door hinges with twine soaked in grease, and you finally fix that one wobbly leg on the stool by adding a strategically placed pebble, good as new, if new means structurally confused. By midday, the rain gives up, and a soft breeze drifts in, carrying the smell of earth and old smoke. You sit outside on a low bench, turning your face toward the pale sun. For a moment, there's nothing to do. No chickens to chase, no fish to gut, no debates about butter churns. Just sky. Just quiet. And then, as always, the quiet ends. From down the road comes shouting. Not the panicked kind, just the overly enthusiastic kind. You recognize the voice. It's Bjorn. Again, he's holding something aloft, waving it like a victory flag. You squint. Is that a carrot? It has 3 ends, he announces proudly. You nod in admiration. A triple-ended carrot is, after all, not an everyday occurrence. Others gather. There's discussion, theories, a brief attempt to name it. Caradrill is proposed and then rejected. This is the rhythm of home. Nothing grand. Just people, mud, vegetables, and moments of small, silly wonder. You don't remember the chores from 3 days ago, but you'll remember Bjorn and his mutant. Carrot. You head inside to check on the laundry. Your socks have dried into abstract art. Your tunic still smells faintly of river, but it's passable. You fold things slowly, carefully, and place them back in their spots. Someone's started preparing the evening meal. You help stir the pot, adding herbs you're 80% sure are edible. Your uncle swears the stew will be just like Mother used to make, and you believe him, because he says it every week, and it's always different. As the day begins, it's downward tilt again. You feel a sense of completion. Not triumph, not glory, but completion. A sense that the hours have been filled, the rain endured, the mutant carrot acknowledged, and the socks somewhat handled. You sit again by the fire. Your cousin plays a low tune on a flute. Your aunt hums as she braids yarn. The cat bats at something invisible, and the long house, filled with the soft sounds of unwinding, breathes around you like an old, sleepy beast. Outside, the chickens settle. The wind quiets. The clouds part just enough for a single star to wink at you through the smoke hole. You're home. And that's enough. Morning greets you, this time with a stifled sneeze and the slow realization that your blanket has migrated halfway across the floor in the night. You tug it back and curl into it a moment longer, listening. The house is still quiet, just the soft sigh of someone stirring under layers of wool, the faint creak of the longhouse, timbers adjusting with the warming light. You stretch slowly, cautiously, as if trying not to disturb the day before it fully wakes. Your legs are sore from crouching at the washing stones, your hands a little raw, but there's no room for complaint. Today is market day. Market day doesn't happen often. Just once every couple of weeks, when enough nearby households have something worth bartering and enough rumors have built up to make the walk into town interesting. The sun is peeking out for the occasion. Shy but curious. You pull on your driest tunic, the one without visible stew stains, and lace up your boots with fingers still stiff from yesterday's washing. Your aunt hands you a satchel full of items to trade, a bundle of wool yarn, a carved spoon to wax candles, and a suspiciously fresh-looking turnip. You add a few fish hooks and a spare belt because someone always wants a belt, and head out. The walk to the market town isn't far, just over the hill and through the patch of forest where everyone agrees not to talk about that time with the haunted tree. The path is muddy but familiar, winding between ancient stones and half-forgotten goat tracks. The air smells like pine and old leaves. Birds chirp with excessive cheerfulness, and every now and then you pass someone else on their Wayne Aber's distant cousins, that one guy who always insists he used to be a king in a past life. You reach the clearing where market is held, and the transformation always amazes you. It's just a field most days, but now it's alive. Tables, cloth-covered stalls, carts creaking with barrels, voices rise and fall. Someone's burning herbs that smell faintly of garlic and ambition. A dog barks. A child squeals. There's a man yelling about onions. You find a spot to lay out your goods, a small blanket on the grass, and arrange your offerings like their royal treasure. The carved spoon goes front and center. You lean the turnip at an appealing angle. Market day is never quiet, never simple. It's where the entire world contracts into a messy, colorful knot of voices and smells and hands passing things back and forth with suspiciously vague agreements. You trade the belt first for a small bundle of smoked trout. Then a wax candle goes for a set of polished shells. Someone wants your fish hooks in exchange for a comb that looks a bit cursed. You agree anyway. A historian once wrote that Norse markets functioned as communal economic rituals, blending necessity with social theater, and you feel it. This is where everything blurs: buying, gossiping, flirting, arguing, and bragging, all wrapped into one loud, muddy event. You love it. You wander from stall to stall, nodding hellos, and peering at woven scarves, antler carvings, jars of cloudy honey, and knives that probably don't need to be that sharp. A traveling seller clearly from far inland offers a bundle of dried mushrooms and a riddle. You take the mushrooms, politely decline the riddle. There's even a skald performing today, an old man with a voice like rain on tin, spinning tales of lost ships and giant bears, and a woman who once tricked the moon into shining twice in one night. Most of the crowd listens with half an ear while haggling over cheese, but you linger a while, letting the rhythm of the story settle in your chest. Fringe tidbit: some skalds were not locals at all, but wanderers who traded stories for food, shelter, and the chance to sleep indoors. Their tales weren't always accurate, but accuracy isn't the point. Memory, mood, myth. That's the heart of it. You grab a hot drink from a woman with a cauldron and no eyebrows. It's some kind of spiced broth, and it scalds your tongue with authority. You sip it anyway. Eventually, your satchel is empty, your stomach moderately full, and your feet sore in new, interesting ways. You've bartered well today, walked away with a bag of herbs, a small knife, and a pair of woven mittens that make your hands feel like royalty. On the walk home, the wind picks up, clouds roll in. You pull your cloak tighter and hum the scald's song about the moon and the woman and the night she wouldn't end. Back at the longhouse, the sun is dipping again, casting gold over the roof beams. You step inside, shake off your boots, and are immediately bombarded with questions. Did you see the onion man? Did you trade for fish? Did you bring the right turnip back? You unpack your goods onto the bench. The mittens are claimed by your aunt. The herbs are tossed into a pot. The knife disappears into someone's belt before you can even protest. You sit, exhale, and realize your legs are buzzing from the walk. But your heart is full in that strange, quiet way. You've left home, bartered in the great chaos of market life, and returned. A small journey, but it counts. Outside, someone starts playing a lute. The melody drifts in through the slats in the wall. You lean back against the wood, eyes half closed, letting the rhythm carry you. The market will return in 2 weeks. The turnips will never stop, and neither, it seems, will the stories. You wake to the unmistakable sound of wind making bold decisions. The longhouse creaks gently, the wooden walls groaning as gusts rush over the roof like invisible herds of cattle. It's still early, no sun through the window slot yet, but the air carries that crispness that only comes before a storm or after a particularly chaotic night of storytelling. Today, you're staying close. Everyone is. When the wind moves like this and the sky hangs heavy with slow-moving gray, no one plans long walks or fishing trips. It's a day for tightening ropes, checking the roof thatch, and pretending you didn't hear something crash behind the tool shed. You rise slowly, trying not to disturb the family members still curled into sleeping bundles, and tiptoed the hearth. Someone's left a kettle over the embers, still warm. You pour the last of the barley tea into a carved wooden cup and sit near the fire, the warmth hugging your knees. The storm hasn't arrived yet, but it's pacing the edges of the village, sniffing at doors and rattling shutters. Days like this aren't about grand achievements. They're about preparation and, maybe a bit of storytelling, if you're lucky. You grab a handful of dried straw and start twisting it into cord. It's a mindless task, meditative almost. Twist, roll, pull. The pile of fresh cord grows steadily. Beside you, your uncle joins in after a while, sitting without a word and pulling his own handful of straw. It's the kind of companionable silence that needs no explanation. Historians still argue whether days like this storm prep days, hunkered down days were considered idle or vital. Because while you're not hauling fish nets or chopping trees, there's something quietly crucial about staying put, noticing what needs mending, and being present when nothing dramatic demands your attention. Later, you help secure the animals. The goat shed door has developed a rattle, so you wedge a spare plank against it, then add a rock for good measure. The chickens are already huddled together in their roost, looking deeply offended by the weather. You make a mental note to dust the coop roof before the next drizzle becomes a downpour. Inside again, someone is sorting through the storage baskets. You're summoned to help inventory an annual, or possibly monthly ritual involving a lot of holding things up and saying, "Is this still good?" while sniffing it and hoping no one notices you're just guessing. You find a dried root that smells like ambition and regret. Your aunt insists it's for digestion. You quietly return it to the bottom of the basket. Among the items is a jar of preserved berries from the last harvest. Someone decides that calls for celebration. And just like that, the mood of the day shifts. The fire is stoked higher. The oldest pan, slightly cracked but still loyal, is placed over the flames. A bit of flour, a touch of honey, and the berries go into a batter so rustic it probably predates language. Soon, the smell wafts through the longhouse, and everyone gathers instinctively, pulled by invisible strings of hunger and nostalgia. You eat the warm cakes with your hands, sticky and sweet, licking the berry juice from your fingers while someone tells a story about a man who fell in love with a tree spirit and ended up living as a squirrel for 7 years. The details are fuzzy, but the moral seems to be, don't kiss trees unless they kiss you first. Quirky tidbit. In some Norse regions, people believed wind spirits could slip through cracks in a house and tangle your thoughts. On days like this, when gusts howl and the fire flickers without warning, it's easy to believe. You spend the afternoon making small repairs, rewrapping the handle of a knife with leather, restuffing the bench cushion that's gone completely flat, and fixing the door latch that your cousin improved last week by making it permanently closed outside. The sky darkens further. The wind whistles, and a few thick drops of rain slap against the walls. You lean near the fire, listening to the rhythm rain on roof, wood popping, kettle whistling like a sleepy bird. It's oddly comforting. As the rain picks up, the longhouse seems to exhale. No one's rushing now. People chat quietly, mend cloaks, sort dried herbs, play at dice games made from bones. Your cousin is trying to teach the cat tricks again. The cat is, as always, utterly uninterested. You pick up your spindle and start spinning wool, something you haven't done in days. The rhythm comes back, quickly pull, twist, wind. The thread grows, a thin cord of potential, and your hands move like they remember something. Your mind doesn't have to. Outside, the wind howls louder, and a branch taps insistently on the roof beam. But inside, the world is solid, warm, sheltered. You're not in a fortress, and you're not on a voyage across the sea, but you're safe, and somehow that feels heroic enough. The story continues. Someone has picked up where the squirrel romance tale left off. Now the tree spirit is a judge, the squirrel man is appealing for his humanity, and there's a talking crow who speaks only in riddles. It's absurd. It's delightful. You lie back on your bench, hands still smelling faintly of wool and honey, and listen. The storm rattles on, but your thoughts have softened. Blurred by firelight and laughter, one star appears through the just one, defiant and distant. You smile, close your eyes, and let the wind sing its old wild song. The morning light creeps in gently today, filtered through a thin veil of clouds that promise better weather than yesterday's storm. You wake. Slowly, the longhouse still humming softly with the quiet breathing of those who have settled into their day. You savor these early moments before the bustle begins. When time stretches and the world feels just a little softer, you sit up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and reach for your boots by the door. Today is a day for fishing, not the frantic, wind-driven kind that demands every ounce of strength, but the calmer, patient sort. A chance to sit beside the water, feel the cold slip through your fingers, and watch the waves whisper secrets. You pretend to understand. Outside, the sky is pale blue, the air crisp but welcoming. The stream near the village glints silver in the sunlight, and you can hear the faint plop of fish breaking the surface. You gather your fishing gear, a simple line, a few hooks, and a basket to hold whatever luck brings. You stroll down the familiar path to the riverbank, the scent of pine and damp earth filling your lungs. The world here is peaceful, a balm for the tired mind. You find a favorite spot beneath an old oak, where the water swirls gently around moss-covered stones. You settle yourself on a smooth rock, untangle your line, and cast it out with careful grace. The waiting begins. It's a quiet kind of meditation. You watch the ripples dance across the surface, the occasional splash of a jumping fish, the lazy drift of clouds above. Time slows, your thoughts drift, and the worries of chores and council meetings fade into the background hum. Historians still debate how often Vikings engaged in leisure fishing versus fishing strictly for survival. Some argue that the riverbank was as much a place of social gathering and storytelling as it was a source of food. You can almost believe it as you listen to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. Your line twitches. You hold your breath and reel in carefully. A small trout breaks the surface, glistening and lively. You smile. Success, however modest, tastes sweet. Nearby, a group of children are splashing at the water's edge, laughing and chasing one another with wild abandon. Their joy is infectious, and you feel the corners of your mouth lift in a rare, genuine grin. The fishing continues in gentle waves. Sometimes there's a tug. Sometimes the line floats empty. You notice the patterns, the way the light shifts, the rhythm of the river, the way a dragonfly darts just above the surface. It's peaceful and strangely captivating. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking fishermen used small, carved wooden lures shaped like fish or birds. These were sometimes decorated with bright paint or feathers, thought to entice the catch not only through movement but also by appealing to the spirits of the water. You catch a few more fish throughout the morning, enough to fill your basket, but not so many as to seem greedy. The sun climbs higher, warming your back, and you feel content. By midday, you pack up and begin the walk home, your steps lighter and your spirit replenished. The village awaits the chores, the meals, the stories, but for this brief moment. Beside the water, time has been yours. As you approach the longhouse, the scent of baking bread reaches your nose. Someone is preparing the evening meal already. The day continues, slow and steady, but for now, you carry the river's calm within you. The afternoon settles into that peculiar space where nothing urgent demands your attention, yet everything feels important in its own quiet way. The sun leans low, casting long shadows across the village, warming the wooden beams and scattering golden light through the smoke hole. You find yourself near the communal weaving loom, a sturdy frame of oak, with threads stretched taut like the strings of a giant harp. It's been waiting for attention, just like the sled runner, the wobbly stool leg, and that one fence post that everyone pretends to ignore. Your aunt is already there, fingers deft and sure, pulling yarn and shifting threads, with a rhythm that seems almost like music. She nods at you, inviting wordless company, and you settle beside her. Picking up a handful of dyed wool, weaving is both art and necessity. The fabric you help create will become cloaks, blankets, or sacks. Each thread, a small promise of warmth and comfort for the harsh winters ahead. The colors are muted earth tones, rust, moss green, charcoal, yet somehow vibrant in the firelight. As you work, stories unfold alongside the weaving. Your aunt recalls a tale about a woman who wove so finely that her cloth could stop a spear. Whether that's true or just a story for keeping young girls near the loom, you're not sure. But you enjoy the image, the idea that fabric can be armor, as well as shelter. Historians still debate how widespread weaving skills were among Viking men versus women. Some evidence suggests men also participated in textile production, especially in smaller communities, but the details are murky. In your village, it seems everyone pitches in when needed. The threads slip through your fingers, soft but strong, and the repetitive motion calms your mind. You glance up and see your cousin watching, trying to figure out the pattern but getting distracted by a particularly loud chicken squawk outside. A fringe tidbit. Some Norse textiles were embellished with intricate patterns believed to have magical properties. Symbols woven not only for beauty but for protection and luck. It's easy to imagine a cloak that guards against more than just cold. The loom creaks softly, the wool shifting, and time seems to fold in on itself. The longhouse fills with the quiet hum of work and the low murmur of conversation, punctuated by the occasional cluck or scrape of wooden tools. As evening deepens, the weaving slows. Your hands grow tired but satisfied. You stand, stretch, and admire the progressor, modest length of cloth that will soon become something useful. You leave the loom and step outside, where the stars have begun to prick the darkening sky. The air smells of pine and smoke, and the village hums softly with life settling down. The day's quiet productivity feels like a kind of victory, not loud or dramatic, but real and lasting. You head back inside, ready to rest, knowing tomorrow will bring new tasks, new stories, and new moments to weave into the fabric of home. Night falls gently, folding the village into a hush interrupted only by the soft crackle of the hearth and the occasional creak of settling wood. You lie back on your chosen spot, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, the warmth a soft shield against the cool air that slips in through the smoke hole. Today's rhythm lingers in your limbs. Steady work at the loom, the conversations shared, the quiet moments of reflection. It's the kind of tired that feels good, like your body remembers it was made to move and create. Even in small ways, you watch the flickering shadows dance across the walls, painting stories only half remembered, half reimagined. The longhouse feels alive, breathing around you, a living thing made of wood, smoke, and the quiet pulse of life. A neighbor hums softly nearby a song about the sea, the waves, and a man who lost his way but found himself again. It's not a song you know, but the melody is soothing, like a lullaby carried by the wind. You think about the tales you've heard, the stories shared over meals and by the firelight. Historians still argue whether Viking storytelling was mostly for entertainment, education, or a way to keep memories alive through generations. Probably all three. Your thoughts drift to a fringe detail. Some Viking storytellers used runes, not just for writing but as mnemonic devices, little symbols etched into objects to help remember complex sagas. It's fascinating to imagine a carved stick helping keep a 1,000-year-old tale intact. Outside, the night is calm. The stars have gathered in full, sparkling like a scattering of tiny fires. The moon is a sliver, a delicate smile in the sky. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The sounds of the longhouse fade to a soft hum. The warmth wraps around you like a gentle embrace, and the stories of the day settle into your bones. You feel part of something steady and enduring, a small thread woven into a vast, ancient tapestry. No grand conquests, no roaring battles tonight. Just home, and the quiet peace that comes with it. You awaken to a different rhythm today. The longhouse is alive with the scent of fresh bread and the murmur of early risers preparing for the day ahead. The air carries a hint of excitement, the subtle buzz of anticipation you don't get on ordinary mornings. Today is feast preparation day. You stretch, pushing aside the woolen covers, and rise to join the flurry of activity. Your hands are quickly put to work, carrying bundles of herbs, chopping root vegetables, and stirring pots thick with savory broth. The longhouse fills with aromas that make your stomach rumble, a rich stew simmering, the sharp temps of pickled fish, and the sweet promise of honey cakes to come. The feast isn't just about the food. It's a chance for the village to come together, to celebrate seasons past, and to honor the spirits that watch over the land and sea. Everyone has a role, from preparing dishes to setting long wooden tables decorated with fresh pine branches. As you work, the stories begin to flow, tales of daring hunts, narrow escapes, and ancient gods whose power still whispers in the wind. Laughter bubbles up around the room, mixing with the clatter of dishes and the occasional playful argument over who can eat the most. Historians still debate the extent to which Viking feasts were ritualistic versus purely social gatherings. Evidence points to a rich blend of both ceremonies honoring ancestors and gods woven seamlessly into the joyful camaraderie of shared food and drink. A quirky tidbit: some feasts included competitive storytelling, where participants would try to outdo each other with tales of bravery or wit. Winners often received prized items like finely crafted jewelry or barrels of mead. The evening sun filters through the smoke-stained windows, casting a warm glow over the bustling scene. You pause to watch your family and neighbors, their faces flushed with excitement and contentment, united in a moment that feels timeless. As the feast begins, you settle into your place, a bowl of steaming stew in hand, ready to be part of the ancient dance of food, story, and friendship. The feast pulses with life, laughter bouncing off the wooden walls, the clinking of cups, and the hearty voices sharing jokes and boasts. The fire blazes high, warming the longhouse and painting everyone's faces with a golden glow. You lean back against the wall, savoring the mix of warmth, food, and fellowship. Between mouthfuls of rich stew and sweet honey cakes, the stories flow freely. Your neighbor tells of a warrior who once calmed a storm with nothing but his voice up. Tale you suspect is part truth, part invention, but you enjoy every word nonetheless. The children listen wide-eyed, imagining the roaring sea and the fearless hero shouting down thunder. You notice how the feast brings out the best, and sometimes the quirkiest in people. Someone tries to start a drinking song but forgets the words halfway through, causing a ripple of chuckles. Another challenges the group to a riddle contest, with questions so obscure that no one really knows if anyone's answers are right. Historians still debate how much feasting was linked to religious rites and how much to social bonding. What's clear to you is that the line between sacred and secular here is as thin as the bread on your plate. A fringe fact: some Vikings believed that mead was a gift from the gods, and spilling a drop was considered a bad omen. You notice how everyone drinks carefully, as if honoring that old superstition, even when the cups are passed quickly. As the night deepens, the music grows louder. The skalds take up their instruments again, weaving melodies that rise and fall like the tides. You find yourself humming along, feeling the timeless pulse of song and story connecting you to all who have gathered here before. You watch the fire burn low and think about the quiet rhythm of this day, so different from the battles and voyages often told in grand histories. This, you realize, is the true heartbeat of life, a calm, steady cadence made of shared moments, small joys, and the warmth of belonging. You tuck your cloak closer as the night stretches out, the village settling into its peaceful rhythm, ready to rest and rise again with the coming dawn.